All right, when you're solving one-step equations with decimals, you do it the same way as we did it with integers, except for when you're adding and subtracting, you have to make sure you line up your decimals. Okay? So we have v plus 84 hundredths equals 6. So the first thing I do is look for my variable. My variable is v. Look to see what operation is being done on that side of the equation. I'm adding. The inverse of adding is subtracting, the inverse of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 84 hundredths to cancel those out. That becomes a zero pair, leaves me with v. And what I do on one side, I have to do on the other. When you're subtracting decimals or adding, you have to make sure you line up your decimal. If I have a whole number, the decimal is at the end, so I'm going to put my 2 zeros. And now I'm going to borrow. 6 becomes 5, 0 becomes 9, and the last 0 becomes 10. 10 minus 4 is 6, 9 minus 8 is 1, 5 minus 0 is 5. So my answer is 5 and 16 hundredths. D minus 14 and 25 hundredths equals negative 23 and 9 tenths. My variable is D. On the same side of the equal sign as the variable, we're subtracting 14 and 25 hundredths. So to get rid of that, to move it to the other side, I have to do the inverse operation. I'm going to add 14 and 25 hundredths. So that leaves me with D. What I do on one side, I have to do on the other. Fill in any places with 0 that does not have a number. Now I have negative 23 and 9 tenths plus 14 and 25 hundredths. I go back to my integer rules. When I'm adding numbers that have different signs, I subtract. So, I have to borrow. I have to regroup this tens to give 10 tens to the one place. 10 minus 5 is 5. 8 minus 2 is 6. Again, I have to regroup. 13 minus 4 is 9, and 1 minus 1 is 0. The bigger number is negative, so my answer is negative. Negative 23 and 9 tenths plus 14 and 25 hundredths is negative 9 and 65 hundredths. W minus 9 and 100 equals 12 and 6 tenths. My variable is W. I'm subtracting 9 and 100ths from W. So the inverse operation is to add. That leaves me with W on the left side. What I do on one side, I have to do on the other. 12 and 6 tenths plus 9 and 100ths is 21 and 61 hundredths. 3 and 2 tenths C equals 8. When you have a number in front of a variable, so when your variable has a coefficient, that is multiplication. You're saying 3 and 2 tenths times whatever number C is representing. So the inverse of multiplying is to divide. I'm going to divide by 3.2 because 3.2 divided by 3.2, anything divided by itself is 1. Anytime you have a coefficient of 1, you just write the variable. So when these two cancel each other out and leaves me with C, I'm going to divide by 3.2 on the right side. The bottom number goes outside of the house, and you have to move your decimal place. However many times you move it on the outside, that's how many times you move it on the inside. 32 will go into 82 times, that is 64. Regroup. 10 minus 4 is 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. Bring down your 0. 32 will go into 165 times. So C is 2 and 5 tenths. And it's a positive divided by a positive, so my answer is positive. 21 and 8 tenths X equals negative 124 and 26 hundredths. I have a coefficient in front of X, so that's multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 21 and 8 tenths on both sides. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative. When I have 124 and 26 hundredths divided by 21 and 8 tenths, I put the bottom number on the outside. 21 and 8 tenths is going into 124 and 26 hundredths. Move your decimal and bring it up. 218 will go into 1,242 5 times, and that is 1,090. 1,242 minus 1,090 leaves me with 152. Bring down your 6. 218 will go into 1,526 7 times. So my answer is negative 5 7 tenths. M divided by 19 hundredths equals 12. The inverse of division is multiplication, so I'm going to multiply by 19 hundredths on both sides. Those cancel each other out when we simplify. 12 times 19 hundredths. 2 times 9 is 18. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 2 times 0 is 0. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 1 is 1. 8, 12, and 2. I have 2 decimal places, so my answer is positive 2 and 28 hundredths. A positive times a positive is a positive. At the fair, 25 food tickets cost $31.25. What is the cost of each ticket? Processing through this, you know that you're going to have to take your total price and divide it by how many tickets you bought. But we have to write an equation to represent that. So if I know that in order to solve it, I'm going to be dividing, then the inverse of that is going to be, I'm going to write a multiplication problem. So I'm buying 25 tickets at some price per ticket. So I'm good. If I don't know the price, I'm going to use a variable to represent that price. And I've spent a total. Anytime you have a total, that's most likely going to be what you're equal to. So when I have 25x equals 31 and 25 hundredths, I'm going to divide by 25 on both sides. The bottom number goes outside the house. Bring up your decimal. 25 will go into 31 one time with 6 left over. 25 will go into 62 2 times with 12 left over. 6 will go into 125 5 times. So my price per ticket is $1.25. All right, when you're solving one-step equations with fractions, it's just like you do with integers, just like you do with decimals, except for you just have to use your fraction rules. When we're adding and subtracting fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So the first one, n minus 1/5 equals 3/5. My variable is n. I'm subtracting, so the inverse of subtracting is to add. I'm going to add 1/5 to both sides. My denominator is 5 and 5. I have the same denominator, so I keep my denominator and add my numerator. 3 plus 1 is 4. So n is 4/5. S minus 7 over 24 equals 1/3. My variable is s. I'm subtracting, so the inverse of subtracting is to add. I'm going to add 7 over 24 to both sides. My denominators are 3 and 24. I do not have the same denominator, so I have to multiply 1/3. My common denominator is going to be 24. So I have to think, what do I multiply 3 by in order to make my denominator 24? Well, I have to multiply it by 8. In order for this to still be an equivalent fraction, what I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. 1 times 8 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. So now I add 7 plus 8 is 15 over 24. If I can simplify it, I need to simplify it. I know that 3 will go into 15 and 24. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. So S equals 5 over 8. All right, H plus 7/10 equals 7/10. So my variable is H. I'm adding, so the inverse of that is to subtract. And anything minus itself is 0. H equals 0. 0 plus 7/10 equals 7/10. 1/5 x equals 4. So I'm multiplying 1/5 times x. If I'm multiplying, then I have to do the inverse operation, which is division. So I'm dividing by 1/5 on both sides. Anytime I divide a fraction, I have to do keep, change, flip. I multiply by the reciprocal. So when you see a fraction in front of a variable like this, you have a variable that has a coefficient that's a fraction, you're just going to go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm multiplying by 5 over 1, which is just 5. I'm just multiplying by 5 on both sides. That cancels each other out and leaves me with x, and 4 times 5 is 20. So 1/5 of 20 is 4. All right, 5y equals 3/10. So I'm dividing by 5 on both sides. I'm dividing a fraction by a whole number. So again, I have to do keep, change, flip. 3/10 times 1/5. 3 times 1 is 3. 10 times 5 is 50. So y equals 3 over 50. 5/8 x equals 2/5. So I have a variable that has a coefficient that is a fraction. So I'm going to multiply both sides by its reciprocal, 8 over 5. Two times 8 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. So x equals 16 over 25. All right, carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years. After 17,190 years, 1/8 of the carbon-14 in the sample will be left. If 5 grams of carbon-14 are left after 17,190 years, how much was in the original sample? A lot of people automatically shut down by this word problem because there are so many numbers. You've got 14, you've got half-life, you've got 5,730, you got 17,190, you got 1/8, and you got 5. The only numbers that matter are 1/8 and 5. Nothing else matters in this problem. So when you're doing word problems, pull out the important information. Carbon-14 has a half-life after 17,000 years. 1/8 of the carbon in a sample. So a sample is what we're looking for. We're looking for how much is in the original sample. So 1/8 of that sample. That means 1/8 times that sample. 1/8 x. 1/8 of the carbon-14 in the sample will be left. If 5 grams are left, so 1/8 times the sample equals 5, how much was in the original sample? So 1/8 x equals 5. Remember, if you have a coefficient of a variable that's a fraction, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And 5 times 8 is 40. There will be 40 grams left.